Hey guys, Farmer Aaron here. This is episode 25, and I have quite the treat planned for you today. I am sharing an interview that I recently did over Zoom with Pressly Williams and David Blackley. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Yes, from Renfrow Hardware and Renfrow Farm in downtown Matthews. They spent some time with me a couple weeks ago, and we talked all about backyard chickens. Yes. So if you have backyard chickens, if you're considering adding backyard chickens to your growing space this spring, then this episode is perfect for you. We are going to get into it today, guys. We are going to talk about all the things you need to know before you bring home baby chicks and take on the responsibility of being a backyard chicken tender. Sorry, can't resist a pun. Y'all know this. And if you're new, I am just full of punny moments. So hang on to your seats. So I don't want to take up too much time in the intro today. I do just want to say thank you for being here. Thanks to all my new listeners, especially those who might be finding me through Renfrow Hardware and Renfrow Farm this week. I would encourage you to go back and listen to my first episode of the podcast. You'll get a full introduction of me, who I am, how I got into growing food, and the different resources and things that I have to support people in the Charlotte area and beyond in their food growing journey. In between this week's episode and my first episode, I've got some really juicy information. So be sure to kind of skim through some of those other episodes that I have done. But without further ado, let's just go ahead, jump in. This is going to be a deep dive. Take notes. And let's talk about backyard chickens. Welcome to the Growing Space Podcast. I'm your host, Farmer Aaron, owner of the Patio Farmer, and I believe that no matter what size space you have, you can grow food at home. Tune in every Tuesday as I share my best tips, tricks, and encouragement for tending to homegrown edible plants. I'm here to support your food growing journey. The Growing Space Podcast is sponsored by Plant Club by the Patio Farmer. Plant Club by the Patio Farmer is a monthly subscription service I started in 2020. It's a membership-based opportunity to take your growing journey to the next level. With 4 different membership options, you get to decide the amount and kind of support that's right for you. All Plant Club members receive access to my online community through a platform called Circle. Having access to this platform allows members to share pictures, ask questions, celebrate harvest, and get to know each other. All Plant Club members also have access to free seeds each month, along with information on how to plant and tend to their crops, with seeding instructions and downloadable resources from the Patio Farmer's Resource Library. Membership starts at just $14 a month. Join Plant Club today by visiting my website, thepatiofarmer.com/membership. Welcome, Pressly and David from Renfrow Farm and Renfrow Hardware to the show. It's so great to have you all here. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking all about raising backyard chickens, which is super exciting. Now is a great time to be adding those additions to your backyard and to your growing space. I'm really excited to talk to you all today and hear all of the wisdom and guidance you have to share about chickens. David, could you just start us off and introduce yourself? Pressly, I'll ask you to introduce yourself as well, but just let us know who you are and tell us a little bit more about the farm and the hardware store and all the things that you do.
Well, I'm David, and I'm Pressly's father, and I'm sitting in the little tiny office of Renfrow Hardware in downtown Matthews. This is our 124th year in business and my at least 40th year here. The store's always been traditionally sort of farm and garden oriented, in addition to just the bolts and the plumbing and that sort of thing. So we've always been interested in growing food, and it's been a transition over the last 4 or 5 decades from strictly just rural farming to more urban type gardening and more intensive gardening. I raised Pressly and 2 other daughters in this business, so they all grew up helping, and my wife works here and my sister works here. And now my son-in-law works here. So we have an emphasis on that. And we as a family always had chickens and had gardens. And so my girls were exposed to that. And now Pressly has the chickens in her backyard. We also have some property down the street, about 9 acres, that we do our urban farming, where we sell vegetables and it's here at the hardware. And then we have classes and that sort of thing there. And it's sort of our hangout. So we kind of practice what we preach. If we're going to trial some vegetable variety, we trial it up there where we can watch it. And if we have a pruning class, then we sort of do it there. So that's what we do. And Pressly has grown up in this business. Like, she didn't even remember not being in here. So she brings a whole new twist of youth and of being a mom and knowing how to use these vegetables and cook them in interesting ways. And her little daughters can gather eggs like the rest of them. So that's kind of what we do.
As he said, I'm Pressly. I'm his eldest daughter, and I joined the family business after college about 10 years ago now, actually 10 years ago last month. I did a lot of flower farming in those early years, and we sold a lot of vegetables, did sort of CSA style produce box kind of things. Since becoming a mom 5.5 years ago, that has all started phasing out in some ways and changing. I'm mostly at home with the girls and spending lots of time cooking the eggs from the backyard chickens we grow and cooking the vegetables we grow, but not as much time in the retail space at the store anymore. Maybe that will come back, but in this time with little children, my gears have shifted, but it's been the time that I've been able to most enjoy cooking the items that we grow. I'm not as busy in the field as I once was. And I still do write our email that we send out from the hardware store each week, and that takes me a few hours each week. So I still have my hand in it a little bit, but not in the same ways as before. But that's just, seasons of life changing.
For those who are listening to the show today and who have never been to the hardware store, I'm just going to paint a really quick picture, but the hardware store is located in downtown Matthews, which is very quaint, very, I would say, like historic downtown area in the Charlotte region. It's a little east of Charlotte. If you haven't been to the hardware store, you must go. I always refer to it as such a gem, like truly, of the Charlotte community and the Charlotte farming community. David, could you give us just a brief history of the store and maybe some insight on how you got started farming and how you came to manage and own this beautiful location?
Well, I always came to Renfrow's as a child. We got our horse feed here. We had horses and we had gardens and we get the plants and the seeds. And I got to know Mr. Renfrow, who was the third generation owner at that time. His grandfather had started it. I did a lot of work for him growing up, mowing grass and cleaning gutters and that sort of thing, and kept up with him through high school, and then went off to college at NC State. And I was co-oping in engineering. So I was working at Duke Power a semester and coming home. I'm going back to school a semester. So I was home one semester working and told Mr. Renfrow, I said, I'd like to stay an engineer in this area. And he said, why don't you just think about buying a store instead? And it just came from a casual conversation. He had no family. He was a bachelor, only child. We talked and negotiated for about a year. So literally after my last exam, I drove home and he handed me the keys and walked out, basically. And he was a silent partner for the rest of his life, but I just started from scratch. It was primarily a farm supply store at that time. Of course, farming was dying out in the Charlotte area, but still had a cotton gin behind the store where the gin cotton for farmers, and it had closed. But so this sort of started from the ground up and found that the biggest element that was worth salvaging and continuing was the gardening business. We still do the shovels and the plumbing, but the gardening business just took off. And it was a real transition from customers that had large plots and had pigs and hogs and cows and all to they broke it up and had housing developments. But we sort of rode that wave, and it's been a good business for my wife and me. And as I say, I've got my sister and my daughters have helped over the years. All of us that have been here so long are all sort of semi-retired now. We're sort of at retirement age. So we've started opening 3 days a week. And yet we're doing just about as much business. And we just do the farm the other days and kind of relax a little bit, because after 40 plus years, you get sort of tired, but we didn't want to stop. And we've kind of gotten a shot in the arm where Pressly's husband is now joining us and is bringing a lot of new insights. But retail is tough. So we have the farm as an alternate so we can practice what we preach and sort of live off the farm, live all the food, that sort of thing. So it's worked out well. And I think we'll just continue on for a good while. It's just a very, very simple story, but that's what happened.
So how long have the two of you had chickens? I know you have chickens at the store, but at the farm and at home, how long have you had chickens?
Well, I grew up with them.
You answer, Pressly.
Oh, okay. I grew up with them in their backyard, but I would say I did not have a whole lot of responsibility around them aside from gathering eggs periodically for those first 20 years of my life. Now being married almost 10 years, we've had them at the farm or at our current location at our house for most of our marriage, not every single year, but at least for the past 5 years. We have had them steadily and have a very large flock for a small family. Right now we have about 20 to 25 birds and are getting about 15 eggs a day. And most of that work is done by my husband, Matthew, but I am involved with it and I do all of the cooking of the eggs.
Wow. You get 15 eggs a day.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow.
And we don't sell them. I mean, occasionally if we have a big influx, but we eat pretty much all of those. But I usually have 5 or 6 dozen on the counter. So I'm never having to scramble for eggs. So, and then we've done.
You have a couple of younger sisters that come and steal them.
Actually, yes. And my parents, I'm supporting them right now. Their flock is not as productive as ours. So they're eating mostly my eggs.
Our flock is getting old. We need to get new ones this spring ourselves.
Yes, we're a little more ruthless about that. We don't want freeloaders. We get new ones every year to keep our flock young.
What is your favorite thing about owning chickens? And why do you think someone should own chickens?
We're in it for the eggs. I love the backyard eggs and being able to have as many of them as I want. And then another thing that I think I noticed this in college, probably when I was not able to do this. I really love that they eat all of our kitchen waste and our garden waste. It was really a struggle for all those years where I did not have anywhere to throw my food, that I had to put it in the trash. And I've never had to do that except in those few years where I lived out of town. But it just is really nice to think, okay, we didn't finish all of this meal, or here's the extras of the broccoli stems, and that's going to turn into eggs. And I love their personalities, love seeing them in the yard running around. They're just a lot of fun.
They are a lot of fun. At home, we have 7 hens in the backyard, and I can see them from like the kitchen window and like our sliding glass door. And it's just fun to like throughout the day, be able to just check on them, see what they're doing. And then obviously like going out and spending time with them and the eggs. Yeah. Speaking of eggs, before we get to the next question. So what is it about backyard chickens that make such good eggs? Like, what are the characteristics of backyard chicken eggs that you don't see in store-bought eggs? Or is it just like the quality and knowing where your eggs are coming from? That's the beautiful thing about eating those eggs.
Well, I can get that one, I guess, because we get that asked by customers all the time. And it's their diet. It's that they're ranging, or at least if you're not allowed to range yours, you can at least throw clover and greens in them. But they are omnivores. They'll eat a mouse or a snake or a clover blossom or a kitchen scrap. There's not much they don't eat. And you crack that egg in a pan and you can see the difference. The yolk is a different color. It stands up good and tall. And they're so fresh that you can't peel them if you boil them. You've got to put them off the side for a week or so to let them get a little old before you can have a boiled egg. We don't refrigerate our eggs. We just leave them on a counter in a little rack. And something about just starting with a room temperature egg when you're either baking or when you're cracking it in a skillet, it just behaves differently. So every day is Easter sometimes around our yard because they don't all lay in their nesting box. You have to hunt for the eggs. And Sometimes you find a nest of them that you don't know how old it is, and you can float test them in a bowl of water and figure out if they're fresh. I tell people, if you like a backyard tomato, the difference between that and a grocery store is the same with eggs. If you want a backyard egg, there's work to it, but it's worth it to me. And I particularly enjoy seeing my grandchildren being involved in it after raising the daughters with it. I think involving children really gives them an appreciation. So when they go off to college, they say, gosh, these eggs in this dormitory are not so good after all.
I love the comparison of if you like homegrown tomatoes, you'll love homegrown eggs. So, David, in your experience, what is the most challenging thing about raising chickens at home in your backyard?
Oh, I'd say it's the critters. It's the hawks and the owls and the possums and the raccoons and the coyotes and the foxes and the neighbors' animals. You do have to protect these animals. You have to look at them not as pets, but as farm animals. And they need to have good protection at night. They need to have a house that can be closed up so the coons wandering around at night don't find them. They need to be protected by hawks during the day. So our run and Pressly's run and my sister's run all have a net on the top so that the birds can't get in them. All around the yard, we have shrubs and bushes and places they can hide. We typically have a rooster. We've got plenty of room, and the rooster's eyes are on the sky all the time, and he makes a sound, and all the hens just disappear. So it's really the predators. If you're going to raise chickens, you're going to learn about death, and you're going to see some violence. You will lose some. That's why you have to get new ones every year. And I would say there are more predators in the urban area than there are in the rural areas. They're spread out more in the rural areas. Some of these critters that we're trying to protect from our chickens, your neighbor 2 houses down might be feeding with cat food or corn or something. So you never really know. You have to go into this knowing you've got to have the proper pen and the proper infrastructure, or you will lose them. You learn to coexist with Mother Nature.
Yes, our birds, we free range almost year round, but actually this time of year, January, February, is when no leaves on the trees, and we have very few shrubs back where our barn is and our chickens live. So they don't have a lot of spaces to hide like David's flock does. So as soon as one gets killed by a hawk, like we had happen last week, we unfortunately just have to keep them pinned up for a few weeks. And we throw in garden scraps and kitchen waste for them instead. But it's not worth it to us to put them in that danger and know that we may lose one, because once a hawk knows where a flock is, he's going to keep checking for a while. So I don't know that ours will really get a lot of ranging time until March, and really until all the leaves are back on the trees and their visibility is protected.
And nesting season for the hawks and the owls, which is around us too, nesting season, you have to be conscious and maybe just let them range in the afternoon instead of all day.
We live up in like Northwest Charlotte, so we're near Latta Plantation, which of course is home to the Raptor Center. So we have lots of birds of prey that like to hang out in our backyard. We also live on a fairly main street, so we see vultures pretty frequently, and which, vultures aren't going to go after anything living. But we also have hawks and owls in our backyard. And we also have neighbors pretty close by, and, don't want chickens ending up in neighbors' yards if they're not expecting that. But we keep the whole entire chicken run under bird netting, which is kind of frustrating, if I'm honest, to deal with, but it's worth it to keep them safe. How do you all keep the chickens safe at night? I mean, I assume they go into the coop, but is there anything that you put around the coop to keep like nocturnal predators away?
Well, my coop and my sister's coop, and I guess Pressly's coop, it's a house basically with perches. So they go up in it. Chickens go home to roost. So they go up in it at night, and we just close a little door, a little ramp that they go in. So every night after dark, either my wife or I will go out and close the door. And then every morning at sunup, we're out there opening the door. The door leads out into the run. So they may stay in the run all day. And the run has the netting over it, and half of the run is covered so that it stays dry so they can have their dust baths. So there's nothing wrong with having a nice big run with the netting over it. But definitely at night, the only thing that we can't close it up tight enough for is the black snakes that come and get the eggs sometimes. So they can find the smallest little hole to get in, but you definitely need to have a tight house that a fox or a weasel or something can't get in, or a raccoon.
And then ours has a house. We do have a door, but we've really only used it in a season where a pesky possum was finding his way in, and we were needing a few days of making sure he couldn't get in so we could secure the hole in we have a dog pen net fence type thing, which is our run. And most of it was already pretty tight, but there was a spot up in the dog pen paneling roof that had a little gap that he had managed to find. So, but our whole perimeter of the dog pen run has paving stones around it, but it's sort of 12 inch size ones, and so that nothing can dig underneath. And then we have plenty of hardware cloth or chicken netting, chicken fencing type stuff so that things can't squeeze through the larger dog panel holes. So yeah, I mean, we've only in 4 or 5 years of that pen had the one possum issue. All of our other death issues have been around birds of prey or a neighbor dog coming through, or our dog once.
This winter, I have been dealing with a pesky possum myself with our chickens, and I can see like somehow he's getting in. We have to keep going in and like tying the netting because of course it tears. Yeah, it's an ongoing process trying to keep everyone safe and happy and healthy too. I mean, with our backyard chickens, we have had several cases where we've had to deal with health issues with our birds. What do you recommend, like in terms of products or practices for maintaining a healthy flock?
Well, we get that question a lot too. There are not going to be any veterinarians around that will work on a $4 chicken or so. You're the parent. We tend to use either some homeopathic methods or some children's medicines. I always suggest if they've got a chicken that's lethargic or just not doing well, get Pedialyte at the drugstore. The same thing you feed your children, which is electrolytes, and just make a waterer with that. If they're really weak, just get them a little glass eyedropper. Everybody should have an eyedropper if you're a chicken owner, and just squirt some down their throat. It's amazing what some electrolytes will do. If their digestion seems wrong or they've got diarrhea or something like that, just some plain yogurt, no vanilla, no strawberry, anything, just like Greek yogurt is usually good. It sort of gets their system started again. If they get badly wounded by a hawk or a raccoon or something, I've used triple antibiotic cream, just the Neosporin type stuff, and kind of massage it in. And a bandage doesn't usually work because they'll pick it off. Hydrogen peroxide is really good for pouring a wound and kind of cleaning it, stuff that you have around your house. I have had chickens that get diarrhea or get the scours, it's called. And again, I'm not a vet, but what I've done is I've got 1 drop of children's Imodium, because we had children at the time, and then filled up the rest of the dropper with water and just squirt it down their throat. So they're getting a little tiny, tiny dose of Imodium, or whatever they call it for children, and that worked. It stopped the diarrhea on the chicken. If they get their legs or their comb injured where they bleed a lot, I use the little septic pencil, like when you cut yourself shaving and you can't get your face to quit bleeding, you get that at the drugstore. You sort of put that on and it kind of causes the blood to clot. So just real basics. Don't ever use an aspirin product like a Motrin or Advil or something, because it's a blood thinner. If you're going to use any pain relief, just a tiny drop of low strength Tylenol watered down seems to help them. Those are just plain old homeopathic things.
I love that, there's things that we use ourselves that we can also use for treating chicken issues. For whatever reason, I never thought of using things like Pedialyte or.
I've never given mine in decades. I've never given them an antibiotic. Some people and I've never given them any kind of medication unless it was just they were just about to pass away, and I'll give them a little drop of that Imodium or something. I typically just use the Pedialyte and the yogurt. Not a lot of yogurt, but just something just to kind of get their gut working again, and it seems to work. Don't let them get cold when they're babies. Don't let them get wet, and don't let them just live in the mud all the time. Your housing conditions can tell you a lot about it. And the cleanliness of your eggs, when you harvest eggs out of your hen house, if they're muddy or poopy, it means their living conditions aren't good. They should be clean, pristine eggs, unless we're just having a real rainy season. And their legs, if their legs are always coated in mud, that means you're not doing something right. So you really should not have to medicate them much unless they get wounded by a critter.
I know some people listening to this podcast are going to be in Charlotte, but there's plenty of listeners elsewhere too. So in terms of bringing home chickens, and especially if you live maybe, in the suburbs or even in the city, you definitely want to check your local ordinances, either your city or your county, or probably both, to get an understanding if there's any parameters around the number of chickens you can have, or if you can have a rooster. Make sure you do your homework before you bring home chickens. But Pressly, how many chickens would you recommend for someone who lives in the suburbs, let's say? And how much room do you think you need to have in order to bring home chickens?
I think you can make it work with a small amount of space, but you definitely need to make sure they have enough square footage in their run or in their nesting area, coop area, to not be overcrowded. We have, what is the size of the pen behind the store?
8x8. It's a dog pen, one of those modular dog pens.
And 8x8, it's, a little bit like shoulder height and has a roof over it. And then just a nesting box bucket inside of it. And that 8x8, we put 3 or 4 hens and a rooster in. And anything more than that would be pretty overcrowded, I think. And you can tell when you have too many chickens for a space like that, if there's just too much poop and smell that you can't keep managed. We put a lot of deep bedding of wood chips and things in our coop where it stays dry. All of that it's a Joel Salatin Polyface Farm kind of method. If your listeners are familiar with him, we learned about that at his farm. We went on a field trip one time, and it really keeps the odor down when you have all of that bedding. But anyway, so that's something you can kind of tell if you're feeling like something's not working with what you have. You may have more than your space can handle. If you're letting them out to free range, then you can have a larger number than if they're in your pen and run all the time. But our pen run is, I think, 10x20, and we have about 20 hens in there. And they get out for half the day most of the year, but not year round. And they do fine with that. But you can have a small backyard and have 3 hens and no rooster, and your neighbors may not even know if they're just let out for part of the day.
So just for the listeners' benefit here, do you have to have a rooster to get eggs?
No, the rooster is not necessary. The egg that you're eating is a daily ovulation versus a monthly or some other kind of ovulation. The rooster will fertilize those eggs so that it can turn into a chick. But there's no difference in taste. There's no difference in the look. There's no difference in the nutritional value. If you get a broody hen and you don't have a rooster, a broody hen's one that's wanting to set on eggs, just get some fertilized eggs from friends or us or somebody and give her some eggs and watch the miracle of a hen that will raise her own babies. It's just amazing, the instinct, even though they've never had a mother themselves probably. But you don't need a rooster. And some of them, I think, probably a little happier not having a rooster pestering them all the time.
I'm going to ask both of you this question. What is your favorite breed of chicken?
I would say currently mine, I would have 2, the production red and the black Australorp. That's what our flock is made of primarily right now. We got black Australorps, maybe 10 of them or so last April, and then 20 of the production reds this past April. So I guess 2 Aprils ago and then last April. And both of them became mature and started laying eggs around Thanksgiving ballpark timeframe. And both winters I have had almost an egg per day per chicken all winter long when they were that young, their first 6 months of laying. And that's why we like to add new ones to our flock every year, because the black Australorps this year are molting and not laying, but only a couple eggs a week probably, versus almost one per day. And so both of those breeds have just been really impressive to me. They're beautiful, beautiful birds, but they're cranking out the eggs. And the only time that since my production red started producing, the only week that they slowed down was that very, very cold week we had in January. Otherwise, we've been getting, if we have, say, 15 of those mature hens, we've been getting 12 eggs from them every day from that many birds. So I'm very pleased with those results. And they're very sweet.
Yeah, that's awesome. We have some sapphire gems, and we have some Rhode Island reds, and then we have, oh gosh, I'm forgetting their name. I feel so bad. The ones that have kind of like the hawk face. It'll come to me, of course, later on.
They're all just chickens.
They're
just chickens.
Just chickens, you're right. Our girls are very lazy winter layers. We don't get hardly any eggs from really just the month of January, but it kind of trickles off. And then this year they half of them molted, and now they're starting to ramp up, and we're starting to get of our 7 chickens, I think I collect usually 4 or 5 eggs a day. But David, what is your favorite breed of chicken?
Well, bear in mind that chickens need 14 to 16 hours of daylight per egg. So that's why they don't lay much in the winter. Mm-hmm. In the long days of the summer, you'll occasionally get 2 eggs from a super mom chicken, but commercially they use artificial lighting to keep chickens laying all the time. But
yes, and
chickens need a rest period. We don't do that. They have to build up calcium in their bones to make eggs again. But favorite chicken, that's like saying which is my favorite daughter. They're all perfect. But my wife probably should be mentioned. She loves her chickens, I think, more than she loves me. She likes chickens a lot, and she does like Buff Orpingtons, because Buff Orpingtons are good mothers. They're good setters, and some of our best little hatchings over the decades have been from Buff Orpingtons. And she doesn't name chickens, but if there's a buff, she calls it Buff. So we'll say, well, we don't have any Buffies now. They've sort of aged out or gotten eaten, but I'm sure she'll want some more Buffs this year because they're good layers. They're nice. You can tame them, but they are good setters. And if you don't mind having a broody hen, and there are other good setters, Rhode Island Red would not be a good mother. It's just something magic about them walking around the yard with their little baby.
I can imagine. So sweet. So you all are going to have chicks available at the hardware store this spring, starting in March. What do people need to know about bringing home little baby chicks?
The schedule of when they're coming will be on the website.
It is on the website.
We call it Chicken Run Day. They come about every other week, big batches of them. We have a bunch of brooders. We separate them in and we feed them and water them before we open, because they come on the airplanes and through the post office. Probably 95% of the time they show up exactly the day they're supposed to. If there's a post office faux pas, it might be a day later or something. We have the little boxes you can put them in, or you can bring your own little box, but you line up out front. We open the door at 8:00. It's called Chicken Run. Everybody comes in. They line up. They tell us what they want. They usually need to have it written down on a piece of paper. We grab them, put them in their box. You need to have already gotten your feed and your heat lamp and your water and all that sort of stuff ahead of time. And then you go straight home. You don't go and get a Starbucks coffee or anything else. You take them home because they need to stay warm and not get chilled. If they get chilled, they won't recover because they're just a day or two old. If you're a newbie, probably don't come the first week or two of deliveries because it's still cold and it's still cool. And there's a chance that in your garage, it might get colder than you think it is at night. Most of the experienced chicken people come the first chicken run week. We'll continue to get chicks until the season, so everybody's gotten them. So it's nothing to get upset and worried about. If you miss a week, you just come another week. We do have a minimum of 3, which is sort of a state law. Chickens are flocking creatures. You don't want 1 or 2. You need to have a trio. After that, you can get singles so you can build up your flock. But watch the newsletter, watch the calendar. If for some reason they're delayed, occasionally the truck from the male facility doesn't come to Matthews till 11 o'clock, but usually it's about 4 in the morning. So usually we've got them and unloaded them and fed them and water them and they're ready to go. It's an exciting hour. After that, it sort of dies down, goes back to normal for the rest of the day.
And our birds I'd say 95% of the breeds we order are sexed by the hatchery, so they will be females. When you're planning out your quantities that you want, if you're going to us or a place that offers sexed birds, you only need roughly the amount that you want to have as your full-grown hens. If you are going to a place that sells straight run chicks, that means you got 50-50 shot as to each one being a boy or a girl. And so you would most likely in those situations they would be probably cheaper birds, but you would have to buy more of them to get the ultimate number of hens that you want, and then have to figure out what to do with those young crowing roosters in the summer.
Sexing is difficult. People think they can watch a YouTube and learn how to sex them, and people will advertise them maybe on the internet or something as being sexed, but it's a pretty difficult task, and the hatcheries are good at it, but make sure you try to find places that are selling sexed hens, sexed chickens. There are some varieties. Each week we'll get what are called the star varieties. There are varieties that are born where their feathers can tell you whether they're females or males. Maybe they have a spot on their head. So each week we'll maybe get a brown star and a golden star, and the next time we'll get a red star or a white star. So you can guarantee that you're getting hens from those varieties. But star varieties tend to be great layers, but not very good mothers if you want to have broody ones.
But yes, and then those other ones is something like 95% accurate on the sexing. And then some things like bantams, the small breeds of chickens, those come as a straight run. There is no sexing done by the hatchery for those.
Incidentally, if you get a bantam and it turns into a hen, she will be absolutely the best mother you can have. We typically have let bantams, and they'll raise everybody's eggs. You can put 10 eggs under her and she will just raise them just like her own. That's why people have bantam hens is to do all the raising, not have to use an incubator.
What is the best piece of advice you could pass along to someone who is brand new to chicken ownership?
Don't spend too much time on the YouTube or the internet, or you're just going to go crazy thinking you got to do all sorts of stuff. People have raised chickens for 1,000 years without the internet. Get a mentor. Just go to a neighbor that has chickens, or ask your parents or your grandparents. Try to go see someone that has a setup, or come look at this pen behind the hardware store. It's very simple. It's low tech. You don't need to build a Coupe de Ville or any of these fancy places unless you just want to. Get a mentor. Just go learn from somebody. Go see yours.
And I would say, get out your lawn chairs when your birds are free ranging and do what my parents like to call watching chicken TV. It's a very delightful pastime to just sit there and watch your birds' personalities. And just don't forget to just slow down and enjoy who they are.
And Chardonnay pairs very well with chicken TV. I'll just let you know.
That's great to know. As you've alluded to, it can be hard to find resources or information. I mean, maybe not hard to find. There's plenty of information and resources out there. And I love, the encouragement to find someone who's had chickens and learn from them and see their space. Are there any specific chicken books or websites, if people are looking online or are looking for resources to help narrow the search process that you all like to look at or reference?
I'm sure there are. I just have not ever needed that. I've been doing chicken since before there was an internet. Pressly probably knows better. Even when you get onto something like the Clemson or the NC State cooperative extension websites, a lot of them are geared more towards commercial growers. And they have all these diseases and all these pests listed that you'll just never see. So I'm sure there are forums. I'm sure there are good books. Probably at the public library. Frankly, they're just so common. But unfortunately, I'm not as aware of that. We have what we call our handout sheet, which is about 4 pages that we print out that we hand to people. And that's all you need. And it's on the website. It's just frequently asked questions. But Pressly could maybe tell you what the the newbies that are her friends maybe are learning from?
Well, I mean, I grew up knowing how to do it myself too. So I haven't looked at too much on the internet either. I do often give people our handout if that's something they're asking about. And then for me, when I am looking at a breed and want to know, okay, which breed are we going to add to our flock this year? I'll look at our hatchery's website that then gives all of the details of roughly how many eggs they lay per year, how broody are they. So if you're looking at just wanting to know a description of different breeds, I would say probably looking at an actual hatchery, whether you're getting your birds there or not, they're going to have straight factual information in it, not be someone's blog about their personal experience with their one flock that you then have to sort through a bunch.
Tell them our hatchery. I think they've got
our hatchery. Ideal Poultry is their name. They're in Texas, and that's really the only website I look at very often. They probably have all sorts of chicken fact sheets and guides as well on there, but I've only used it for looking at their breed descriptions. But it's a simple, basic website, but very clear. I have looked into some of the chicken blogging world when I'm trying to write our newsletter and find an article to go into more detail than I can give in an email as a resource. And there's just a lot of people with lots of different contradicting information and opinions about chickens online, and a lot of very strong opinions. And I just personally don't want to give chickens that much of my brain space.
No, they're just chickens. Remember that.
As much as I enjoy them, I just keep it simple. Story Publishing, we used to carry a lot of their books at the hardware store, Storey. They had a lot of chicken books. I would say that if you're looking for a book, maybe looking at their publishing website and see some titles there. But I don't have any specific titles to share.
It's good to know that the hatchery websites are really helpful and a good go-to resource. This goes to vegetable growing as well. There's just so much out there, and people get really adamant and passionate about what works for them, but just because something works, for someone across the country or even on the other side of the state, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to be best for you. And so great guidance there. Okay, so we are getting close to the end of today's episode. I feel like we could probably talk about chickens for another hour, or maybe two, or we could just keep going on. But I do like to ask all of my podcast guests these two questions. So we'll start with the first one. What is your favorite vegetable and why?
Tomatoes, for sure. Tomatoes are by far my gateway into wanting everything that I eat to taste as good as a backyard tomato does.
Homegrown tomatoes.
Yes. Yes. A homegrown tomato.
Pretty tough to.
Compared to a grocery store tomato. I don't eat tomatoes out of season. And loving that as a child has led me into, I don't want to eat broccoli out of season either. And now I don't want to eat carrots from the grocery store and all of it. But tomato was my first favorite food, and still probably would be in my top 3 favorite foods.
Well, since you took that, I can't use that. I'd say probably okra. There's so many ways you can cook okra, and you can use it to thicken soups and all. My wife is real good about drying okra, chopping it up and putting it in the dehydrator so we can have it in the winter, and dried okra reconstitutes very well. So it gives me just a little flavor of summer, even in the winter. More so than canned tomatoes, which are good too. But I don't know. I tell you, okra, whether it's boiled or fried or roasted okra, is just a whole new. I didn't know about that growing up, but boy, I can roast okra and eat it like candy.
Okra is delicious. When I was working as a farm manager, there was a woman that I worked with, and one day it was the middle of summer, and we were just out walking, around the plants, checking on things, and she pulls fresh okra, like a fresh okra pod, off the plant and just bites right into it. And I had never seen someone eat raw okra like that. And I just looked at her, and she was like, "What?" I'm like, "You just ate that raw." She was like, "Yeah, haven't you ever tried it?" And I tried it, and it was delicious. And now that's my favorite way to eat okra.
It's wonderful. And when we're working in the fields, that's the go-to. If you're a little bit thirsty or you want a snack, you just go over and get a pot of okra, and it's it's delightful. So it's a very useful, and not a lot of pests bother okra. That's what you can grow okra. I mean, I think a newbie can grow okra and do well with it. Now I'm going to have to go home and have okra for supper now.
Well, I already have it planned in my chicken pot pie tonight. So I will be having it in my supper tonight.
Did you steal some from your mother?
No, she gave it to me.
Okay, so she gave it to you.
Yes.
My girls are really good about coming by and going away with canning jars full of stuff. So I make them bring the jars back.
Another question for all my podcast guests is, what is the most important thing that you have learned? And for the sake of this episode, I threw in a pun. The most important thing you have learned as a chicken tender.
For my children, it would be learning about life and death and respecting and caring for life and death at such a young age and in a tangible way. I guess that's not what I've learned, but through them seeing what they have learned, it has been one of the most valuable parts of having chickens for them, and especially when they get a little bit older and are able to be more involved in the caring of them. And yeah, I just think that it has made death a little bit less mysterious or scary to see.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, really. It was great raising children where if it got really cold, you needed to do something to help your chickens. If it got really hot, you needed to deal with it. Heat is the enemy. If it's muddy, you need to go clean the pen out. There's a responsibility there, and there's a respect for these animals. You are a caretaker for these animals. And then yet it brings so much pleasure to my wife. She loves her chickens, and she loves her cats and dogs and everything else. But it's a comfort. If we didn't have it, it'd be like not having a friend or something. So they are part of your life. And if you're not the type of person that takes care of an animal or something, then keeping chickens is not what you need to do.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your time and chatting about chickens with me today. Before we close out, just tell everyone how they can reach out or find you. Maybe, share how they can sign up for your newsletter, which is fantastic and a must read every week.
Our hardware store website is just renfrowhardware.com. We have a farm website as well, Renfrow Farms with an S.com. And we have Renfrow Farms on Instagram and then Renfrow Hardware on Facebook, which those two are linked together. And you can sign up for our newsletter at probably most of those places, but most likely just going to the hardware store website. There's a spot in the top right of the website that says newsletter. And we have had a long hiatus on social media, but now that my husband's on board in the store, he is working our online presence back up again to the way it used to be when I was full-time working, with all sorts of teaching bits and fun information. So you can do that and then just come see us. We love just chatting in person at the store.
Remember, if you're coming, we're open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 days a week, 8 to 4. We're semi-retired now. All of the rest of us are old. We do have the other days we're at the farm or in our shop, but the website has those hours and has the address, and we've got parking in the back and parking in the front, plenty of room. And we do have the chicken pen out back. You can come study and see what it looks like.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Pressly and David, so much. And I'll see you in the store soon.
Well, thank you, Erin. It's always fun to see you too. And we love your website as well. I look at it every time it comes, your newsletter.
Aw, thanks, David. I hope that this episode inspires you and gives you confidence, gives you some more resources and information to be able to incorporate a small flock of chickens, or heck, maybe a big flock of chickens, into your growing space and into your growing practice this year. And if you ever have any questions at all about chickens, you can reach out to me. I have had chickens now for the past, like 5-6 years. That's kind of crazy to think about. I think it's been 6 years I've had chickens. And obviously, David and Pressly are available as well. Anytime you have any questions, you can pop into the hardware store and see them. But yeah, definitely reach out and know that there are people here to support you in taking on chickens, because it can be hard to find resources and information online sometimes, but we're in your corner. So you got this. So I did just want to mention, as a little reminder, I am planning on doing an entire podcast episode later this spring in just a couple weeks, where I am going to answer all of your questions. The entire podcast episode is going to be dedicated to answering questions from you all, from my clients, from my customers, from those listening to this podcast, from my Instagram followers, literally anyone who has a question about growing food at home and you want my insight, my perspective on it. I can't wait to hear what's on your mind and help to provide some guidance and coaching for you. So if you have some questions that you would like to submit for this episode, please email them to me. I will put the email address in today's show notes, but it is simply thegrowingspacepodcast@gmail.com. Again, it's just thegrowingspacepodcast@gmail.com. So as you're planning and noodling on all the things you want to grow and you have questions that pop up that you want me to answer, just email them over to me for that special spring episode. Again, the email address to send those to is thegrowingspacepodcast@gmail.com. So if you have listened to this podcast in the past, then you will know that at the end of every episode, I like to share a fun fact or a little morsel of information to sign off on. And today I'm going to share my 3 favorite fast growing spring veggies with you. You ready? Okay, the first one is pak choi. I am obsessed with pak choi. They're just the cutest little cabbages and they grow so fast. Like you can seed a pak choi and it will be ready to harvest in a month, maybe a little over a month, but not too much longer than that. My second one is lettuce, specifically leaf lettuce, because you can come back to a leaf lettuce variety over and over again for harvest throughout the spring. Spoiler, in case you didn't know, we are growing lettuce this month in Plant Clubs. So if you would like to do a deep dive on lettuce this month, maybe you'll consider joining Plant Club. Be sure to check the link in my bio. And then my third favorite fast growing spring crop is radish. They are just so cheerful. I love seeding them and then watching their little shoulders, their little colorful shoulders just peek out of the soil, also within a month usually of being seeded and ready to harvest. So there you go. Those are my top 3 favorite fast growing spring crops: pak choi, leaf lettuce, and radish. Next Tuesday is the first day of spring. Now, what have we been gearing up for the first day of spring, other than, of course, saying goodbye to winter officially and welcoming the new season and, longer daylight. But beyond that, what have we been gearing up for? It's my masterclass. So I have been working so hard on getting this masterclass in ship shape and ready and recorded and shared. So next Tuesday, in addition to being the first day of spring, is also when my masterclass, the 6 S's to Success, is going to go live. Oh yeah. And in next week's episode, I'm actually going to share a little bit of the masterclass with you on this podcast. And we're going to talk about soil. I feel like in a couple of episodes, I have kind of teased the idea of doing an episode all about soil. And because soil is the 3rd S to success in my masterclass, I'm going to share with you just a couple of snippets from the soil module of my masterclass next week. First of all, just to celebrate soil, and then also to celebrate the launch of my masterclass. And maybe, just maybe, I'll have a special little offer tucked in for podcast subscribers for my masterclass. Okay, well, have a great week, and I hope you're getting your spring growing spaces planted and seeded. Until next week, friends, thanks for being here. Thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of the Growing Space Podcast. I hope that you learned something new and that you were able to take this new information home with you and implement into your growing journey and into your growing space. As always, I am here to support you in your food growing journey. If you'd like to learn more about the different services and resources and membership programs that I run through the Patio Farmer, please check out my website, thepatiofarmer.com. You can also follow me on social media. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and oh my gosh, most recently, TikTok. Wow. I know. Here I am. Patio Farmer is on TikTok. It's very exciting. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like or a rating or a review if you want. Maybe share a little comment about your favorite part of the episode. Share it with a friend. The more interactions I get with my little podcast online, the more I'm able to help people just like you in their food growing journeys. As always, thanks for being here, and I will see you again next week.